All right, welcome back to Sip and Talk. So, anything interesting happening your way lately?
Well, define interesting. Same old, mostly. You?
Oh, I've got one. My next door neighbor.
Yeah.
Perfectly. Every time he gets a few drinks in him, he's out on his balcony yelling, "You're all trying to steal my TV." Seriously, who wants his ancient TV?
Oh my gosh. That's actually a strangely perfect analogy for what we're seeing with China these days, isn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, you hear the constant refrain, the world is trying to contain us, everyone's encircling us. But then at the same time, they're sending military jets near Taiwan almost daily, flexing muscles in the South China Sea. It's like your neighbor waving a knife around screaming about burglars.
Yeah, the more he waves it, the more threatened he feels when people look nervous. Okay, I see it. But, there are some voices inside China, right? People who seem a bit more grounded.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the paradox. You have these clearer voices, people who sort of step outside the main narrative. Think Ren Zhengfei at Huawei, or figures like Jack Ma, even academics like Li Dokui. They pop up occasionally, reminding people to face reality.
Right. So today on Sip and Talk, we should probably dig into that. These people jumping out of the propaganda narrative, as you put it. What are they actually seeing?
Exactly. And maybe explore why the country as a whole seems to be doubling down on, well, being the guy waving the knife at everyone else's door.
Okay, so let's break it down. Maybe 3 layers to this conversation for you listeners.
Sounds good. First, let's talk about those realists. The ones who dare to admit things aren't maybe quite as rosy as the official story says.
Okay.
Then second,
we need to get into this culture of self-hypnosis. The Chinese term is zihai. How does that over-the-top self-praise keep the society sort of insulated from reality?
zihai, got it. Self-hypnosis in the third layer. And finally, let's connect it all. Where does China actually perceive the threat coming from? And why does feeling threatened seem to make them become the threat in other people's eyes, this whole knife-waving cycle?
Right, how a country accidentally maybe becomes the very thing it fears. And just to be clear, this isn't about, bashing China.
Not at all. It's about understanding that cycle, how self-defense can kind of morph into something that looks a lot like aggression to others.
Okay, let's start with those realists then. Because you're right, the official line is always victory, always far ahead in tech, in everything. But the people running the actual companies, sometimes they slip up and tell the truth.
Or maybe not even slip up, but feel the need to state the facts. And the contrast is, well, it's stark. While the government's trumpeting tech dominance, you get Ren Zhengfei, the founder of Huawei, being surprisingly candid.
Wow, I mean, that's the poster child for China beating U.S. sanctions, right? The symbol of defiance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The ultimate symbol. But Ren himself publicly admitted not that long ago that Huawei's own chip, it's still behind the U.S. by a generation. A full generation.
Wow, that flat out contradicts the whole Yao Gangxian, the far ahead slogan they pushed so hard with that Mate 60 phone launch.
Completely contradicts it. And it's more than just like a technical detail. He's pointing fingers internally, isn't he?
Yeah, it sounds like it. He's saying the lag isn't just because of outside pressure.
Right. He specifically said the real challenge, the long-term one, is rooted in China's education system and talent development. He's basically saying the foundations need work, not just the manufacturing.
It's pretty brave, honestly, especially when the whole national story is built on being number one. Who else fits into this realist camp?
Well, the most famous example probably is Jack Ma. Remember his big speech in 2020?
Oh, yeah.
Where he basically tore into the Chinese financial system, called it a pawn shop mentality, didn't he? Said it was stifling innovation. He did. And we all know what happened next. Boom. The Ant Group IPO, set to be the biggest in history, just vanished overnight.
Yeah. A pretty clear message that criticizing the system, even if you're Jack Ma, is risky business.
It really showed the system's brittleness, didn't it? And then you also have maybe less explosively respected economists like Li Dokui. They consistently advise the leadership, behind the scenes mostly, to look at the world realistically.
What kind of advice?
Things like, don't get high on your own supply. Don't make huge strategic mistakes because you overestimate your own strengths and underestimate others, especially the U.S.
So they're pointing to the less tangible stuff, like the U.S.'s institutional stability, its financial system, the whole global network it has.
Exactly. The ecosystem.
Yeah.
They're saying, hey, recognize these enduring strengths. Don't assume you've already won just because you made a slightly better chip this year.
It's fascinating that these voices exist, even if they sometimes get slapped down. It shows there's some awareness, at least, of the gap between the hype and the reality.
Which leads us nicely into our second bit. If the bosses know they're behind, how does the state spin that? Well, they lean into the Z-high.
Z-high. Okay, let's unpack that. The self-congratulation, the self-hype, this is like the psychological fuel for the whole thing.
Pretty much. It's a culture that blows domestic achievements way, way out of proportion, just spectacularly so. And maybe more importantly, it frames any competition, any criticism, even valid technical points as just malicious oppression.
And that taps into some deep historical stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a potent mix. You've got the century humiliation narrative, the historical trauma blended with this modern push for the great national rejuvenation.
So it creates this weird mix of anxiety and, well, narcissism.
Kind of, yeah. A collective identity that's constantly afraid of being held down, but also utterly convinced of its own inherent superiority and destiny to be far ahead.
Okay, let's bring Huawei back in here. The Mate 60 Pro launched last year. The Z-high was intense. What was the core claim versus the boring technical facts?
The claim was nothing short of total victory. You had state media basically declaring the end of Western tech dominance. Their blockade failed. We did it ourselves. That was the vibe.
Okay. And the reality check, for those of us outside the bubble.
Well, the reality is a lot more complicated and, frankly, sobering. You have to look at the actual chip, the Kirin 9000s.
Made by SimSmic, their domestic manufacturer.
Right. First off, the yield rate, how many good chips you get per wafer, is reportedly around 30%, maybe less.
30%. And what's like normal for the cutting-edge guys like TSMC?
TSMC on their comparable 5-nanometer process is probably hitting closer to 70%, maybe more. That massive difference in efficiency. It makes mass production incredibly expensive and difficult.
Okay, so they can make some, but scaling it up is a huge hurdle. What about performance?
Also lagging. Compared to the chips in, say, top Android phones from Qualcomm, the Kirin 9000s uses about 20% more power, and its graphics performance is maybe 15% lower. Measurable differences.
And the kicker, how are they actually making these chips?
Yeah, the really crucial detail, the Z-high narrative conveniently ignores. They're still using foreign technology, specifically DUV lithography machines from ASML, a Dutch company.
DUV, that's not the most advanced stuff, is it?
No, the absolute cutting edge requires EUV, extreme ultraviolet lithography, which China cannot currently buy or produce. So they're using older generation DUV machines, pushing them to their absolute limit, which partly explains the low yield and performance issues. They're still dependent on foreign tech for the core manufacturing capability.
So the slogan shouts far ahead, but the reality is 2 generations behind using older foreign tools. That's quite a gap, and dangerous if your leaders actually start believing the slogan.
Hugely dangerous for strategic planning. And you see this pattern elsewhere too, right? Electric vehicles, BYD is enormous, a huge success story.
Yeah.
But they claim to be surpassing Tesla. The reality is their domestic dominance relies pretty heavily on government subsidies, maybe around 15,000 RMB per car, depending how you calculate it. Their battery tech, while good, often has lower energy density than Tesla's latest. And now, they're facing hefty new tariffs in the EU, precisely because Europe sees this as unfair state-sponsored competition.
Right. The success isn't purely market-driven. What about AI, like Baidu's Ernie Bot versus ChatGPT?
Same story, different sector.
Yeah.
Big claims domestically about catching or surpassing ChatGPT. But independent benchmarks show it's generally weaker, especially in complex reasoning or non-Chinese language tasks. And its global impact, minimal compared to the U.S. players.
So this constant Z-high, the self-hype, it creates what you called a cognitive bubble.
Exactly, where it becomes really hard for people inside, maybe even some policymakers, to tell the difference between, legitimate national pride and just objective reality. And when you can't see the world clearly,
You make bad decisions. You misread things.
which I guess leads us straight into the international mess, the Nike cycle. Yeah, because that inability to self-assess realistically really poisons how China interacts with the world. We have to try and see their perspective first, though.
Okay. So why the massive military buildup? The Navy growing like crazy, the missile forces. What's the internal justification?
Internally, it's framed almost entirely as defense, purely necessary deterrence. They'll say they need to protect core interests, that means Taiwan primarily, and their claims in the South China Sea. They also genuinely feel encircled by U.S. alliances like the Quad or IUQs.
So in their view, they're just building a strong fence because they feel threatened.
That seems to be the genuine belief for many. It's about preventing others from interfering or attacking. That's the intent.
Okay, intent is one thing, but how does the neighborhood perceive it?
And that's where the paradox bites. China's actions, what we call the knife waving, the constant military drills right next to Taiwan, the building of artificial islands in the South China Sea, the incredibly harsh rhetoric about using force.
It doesn't look defensive to Taiwan or the Philippines or Japan or the U.S.
Not at all. They see it as straight-up aggression, expansionism, bullying. So what do they do in response?
They get nervous.
Well, they pick up their own knives, right?
Precisely. Defense budgets go way up across the region. Japan's revising its pacifist constitution. The Philippines is strengthening ties with the U.S. Australia buys nuclear submarines. The U.S. sells more advanced weapons to Taiwan.
And how does China see that reaction?
Yeah. They see their neighbors arming up, strengthening alliances, and they take it as absolute confirmation that they were right all along. See? They are trying to encircle us. They are hostile.
Wow. So the defensive reaction caused by China's actions is then interpreted by China as proof that its initial aggressive defensiveness was justified.
It's a perfect, tragic, self-fulfilling prophecy. The security dilemma on steroids, fueled by that internal Z-high culture, which makes it almost impossible to ask, hey, maybe we're part of the reason everyone's so nervous. Okay, this sounds incredibly dangerous. We hear so much talk about war, especially over Taiwan. What's the actual, near-term risk, say the next 5 years? Is a full-blown invasion likely?
Most serious military and political analysts, even those quite hawkish on China, tend to agree that a massive D-Day-style amphibious invasion of Taiwan is actually pretty low probability in the short term.
Why is that? It seems like they talk about it constantly.
The costs would just be astronomical for Beijing. Militarily, it's incredibly complex, way harder than people think. Economically, the sanctions and disruption would be devastating. And politically, failure or even a very costly success could destabilize the party itself. The risks are just immense.
Okay, so the biggest, loudest scenario might be the least likely, short term anyway. So what is the real immediate danger then?
The highest risk, the thing that keeps strategists up at night, is miscalculation or accidental escalation.
How does that happen?
Well, think about it. You have Chinese jets and warships constantly operating in very close proximity to U.S., Taiwanese, Japanese, Filipino planes and ships every single day, in crowded airspace, in contested waters like the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea.
Things get tense. Someone makes a wrong move.
Exactly. Yeah. A pilot gets a little too aggressive buzzing another plane. A ship commander misjudges a turn. There's a collision, an accident. Someone maybe fires a warning shot that's misinterpreted. Suddenly you have an incident that neither side planned or wanted, but national pride kicks in. The Z-high factor makes backing down impossible, and things spiral incredibly fast.
Regardless of the original intent being defensive, it goes back to your neighbor analogy, doesn't it? The real danger isn't the imaginary TV thief. It's the drunk guy waving the knife who might accidentally hurt someone or himself because he's so convinced the thief is real.
That really captures it. The biggest threat China might actually face isn't some grand external plot to hold it down. It's the consequences of its own strategic misjudgments, fueled by that internal bubble, that Z-high, and this escalating knife cycle it's trapped itself in.
So wrapping this up, what's the core takeaway for you listening?
I think the key is understanding this paradox. The danger isn't necessarily deliberate malice, though intentions are hard to read. It's more about how this drive for security, distorted by internal narratives that don't match reality, ends up making everyone, including China itself, feel less secure. It creates this constant grinding tension.
And we hope this Sip and Talk helps you engage in some independent thinking. Like we said, this isn't about taking sides. It's about looking objectively at the narratives, the facts on the ground, the Z-high, and the strategic realities.
Trying to understand the difference between the story a country tells itself and what's actually happening, and why that gap can be so dangerous.
And maybe here's a final thought for you to mull over. What if the biggest challenge China faces isn't the United States, or regional alliances, or anything external? What if it's really about its own reflection in the mirror?
The inability to honestly assess its own strengths and weaknesses, and to see how its actions look from the outside.
Exactly. Until there's a clearer view of reality internally, that knife cycle just seems likely to keep spinning faster, doesn't it?
It's a sobering thought. Well, thank you for joining us for this Sip and Talk.
Yeah, thanks everyone. If you found this useful, please do subscribe to the Sip and Talk podcast. And hey, if you need a break from all this heavy stuff, check out our old friend Mickey's YouTube channel. It's called Mickytolife.
Yeah, Mickey's great. Lots of fun stuff. Memes, drinks tasting, travel vlogs around Europe. Definitely a good palate cleanser.
Totally. So go check that out. We'll catch you next time here on Sip and Talk.
See you then.